الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Beloved ulama, brothers and sisters, respected hujjaj, mothers and fathers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, last week we started the chapter of tayammum and we looked at the reasons that warrant, the situations that warrant one to perform tayammum. And this evening, in a very short section, we're just going to unpack one of those conditions, one of those scenarios that we spoke about last week. And we are looking at those people and animals that don't qualify, essentially those people, those animals for whom water may not be preserved as an excuse to perform tayammum. And I'll explain this in more detail shortly, but just to refresh our memories. Last week we spoke about asbabut tayammum, the reasons, the scenarios when a tayammum may be performed, and we mentioned three. Faqdul ma, the loss of water, the absence of water. Secondly, wal marad, we described the illness in detail. And then the third, when there is a little bit of water left over, you maybe have a few bottles, there's no water coming out of the taps, you have a little bit of water left over, and you now need to take a decision. Do you have enough to perform wudu and still sustain yourself, or do you shift over to tayammum? And this evening's session, this evening's lesson is about this third condition. When you only have a little bit of water left. If you are traveling as well, if the taps have run dry, and we know we experienced this in our city 2 years ago or so, 2-3 years ago, this was a reality. So we look at, and let's look at what the Shaykh writes. He says, وَالْإِحْتِيَاجِ إِلَيْهِ لِعَطْشِ حَيَوَانٍ مُحْتَرَمٍ. He says when there's a need for the water, you have some water, there's a need for it, either to quench your own thirst, to sustain yourself, or for an animal that qualifies. So a person that qualifies, or an animal that qualifies. And that is what we are looking at this evening. So the Shaykh now continues and he says, so just again, very quickly, this is the scenario. You have a little bit of water, and you are deciding that I need to use this water either for myself or for other people or for animals that I'm responsible for or near to me. I want to preserve that water and perform tayammum. Now the Shaykh continues in this evening's lesson and writes, these individuals and people don't qualify to use that little bit of water. This is a very important area, that these 6 are the non-qualifying individuals and people. You can't keep that little bit of water for these people and these animals. And we look at this, and it's a very important area because we look at how fiqh changes now. The first, tarikus salah, Allahu Akbar, the person who leaves of salah. So if you have a little bit of water left over, you can't rationalize and say, well, I need to keep it for this person, but that person is tarikus salah. He has left his salah. That person doesn't qualify. The next was zani al-muhsan, the person who is an adulterer, a confirmed, convicted adulterer, not suspected, but confirmed. The third, wal-murtad, the apostate, the person who gave up Islam. You can't be keeping water for them to shift over to tayammum. Look how important this is. Then, wal-kafir al-harbi, importantly here. And the non-Muslim that is in active war with Muslims. So we're not saying non-Muslim on its own. Let's understand this correctly. Al-kafir al-harbi, the non-Muslim who is fighting Muslims, killing Muslims, attacking a Muslim country, that individual, so we perhaps, may Allah assist our brothers and sisters in Palestine, but they may face a situation like this, where they have a little bit of water, the water is cut off, they have only 2 or 3 bottles, and they need to decide, do I give it to an animal, do I give it to another person, or do I perform tayammum? They have to take these decisions. And so if it is someone that is non-Muslim and of the enemy that is fighting the Muslims, that person doesn't qualify. And the Muslim must consider the appropriate use of the water. The 5th, the vicious dog. And the 6th, a pig, khinzir. So, to refresh and as we conclude, if there's a little bit of water left, and I know maybe some are going to be traveling now, inshallah, in December, maybe they travel, alhamdulillah, there are many garages, petrol stations, but you might be in a particular part of the country where water source is scarce and you have a little bit of water, and you then need to consider, well, can I perform tayammum now, or do I use the water that I have? You'd apply these laws. You'd consider how far do you need to travel, do you have the means to travel, at what stage is this, has the waqt entered, all of those considerations, as well as if you have a little bit of water, should you preserve it, or should you or use it and perform wudu. Now, if you have a little bit of water, the ulama have written that if you are considering that this is your last bit of water and you're not sure if you'll have another source of water, that amount of water must be enough for a day. Meaning, you can see you have maybe, I don't know, 2 liters or something to that effect, 2 liters, and you decide, well, this is only enough for me to drink and maybe my family until tomorrow, then you shouldn't risk it. Now, some might say, no, let's tawakkul, let's use it, inshallah, Allah will send us water. Now, fiqh works in this manner. Here are the laws. If you know definitely that you've searched for water, there's no water, you are now qualified for tayammum, you have a limited supply, you then shift over to tayammum, if the conditions are met. So we conclude this evening that if there is a little water that you have to sustain yourself in qualifying people and animals, so all people and animals qualify except the 6 we've highlighted. All other people and animals qualify, then you can perform your tayammum in that state, inshallah. Okay, any questions? Yes, so when we talk about al-kalb al-aqub, the vicious dog, the question is, please describe the vicious dog. The dog is one that attacks you, that seeks to attack you as the person who has the water. So the dog is vicious to you. So if the dog perhaps is not vicious to another person and that person can feed that dog, give that dog something to drink, then the dog doesn't fall into that category. But when we talk about an animal that is aqur, an animal that is wild and wanting to attack and cannot be calmed down, we are saying don't risk your life or injury to give the dog water. So then you exclude the dog from that category. Inshallah. Okay. Jazakallah khairan. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rabbil alamin.